The smog over Sector 4 did not smell like pollution today. It smelled like ozone and cheap noodle broth, the signature scent of a morning where 3 million sentient beings woke up and realized they were still broke. Jace Rowan adjusted the collar of his suit. It was a second-hand synthweave he had bought from a liquidation vendor in the lower districts, but after 3 hours of steaming and a careful application of fabric spray, it looked almost new. Almost. He caught his reflection in the mirrored glass of a maglev train speeding past the platform. He looked tired, but he also looked sharp. He had the kind of face that usually smiled at bad jokes, framed by dark hair that refused to lay flat. But today his expression was calibrated for serious professional ambition. He was 24 years old. He had 30 credits in his account, and in 1 hour, he was going to interview for a junior systems analyst position at the Heliox Consortium. If he got this job, the crushing debt his father had left behind would vanish within a year. If he got this job, his mother could finally afford the gene therapy for her lungs. He stepped onto the transport, squeezing between a 4-armed Tellarite docker and a businessman reading a holographic news feed. The headline scrolled in bright red text. Emperor's health rumors persist. Palace denies instability. Jace ignored it. Imperial politics were a game for people who did not have to worry about the price of filtered water. The transport shot upward, rising through the layers of the orbital metropolis. The grime of the lower levels gave way to the gleaming steel and glass of the corporate canopy. This was where the air was scrubbed until it tasted like nothing at all. This was Heliox territory. Jace checked his wrist comp for the 10th time. He had a message from Eris, his old mentor from the Technical Academy. Remember what I told you, the text read. Heliox does not hire thinkers. They hire cogs. They value obedience over courage. If they ask you what is 2 plus 2, you ask them what number they would prefer it to be. Do not be a hero. Just get the paycheck. Jace exhaled slowly. He could be a cog. He was good at being a cog. He had spent the last 3 years fixing busted atmospheric scrubbers for ungrateful landlords. Being a cog for Heliox meant air conditioning and a dental plan. The Heliox Tower was a monolith of white stone and blue light, piercing the artificial sky of the Habitat Dome. Jace navigated the security checkpoints with practiced ease, letting the scanners read his biometrics. Rowan, Jace, Citizen Tier 4, clearance, pending. The interview room was white. Everything was white. The table, the chairs, the walls. It was designed to make you feel like a stain that needed removing. The interviewer was a woman with silver implants along her jawline, marking her as upper management. She did not blink often enough to be entirely comfortable to watch. State your primary function in a crisis, she said, her voice devoid of inflection. Jace folded his hands on the table. He did not fidget. To secure assets and ensure protocol continuity, Jace recited, if you witness a superior violating protocol to increase efficiency, how do you report it? I do not report it, Jace said, the lie tasting like copper in his mouth. I assume the superior has authorization I am not privy to, and I focus on my assigned tasks. The woman paused, her eyes pale and digital, words softly as they zoomed in on his pupil dilation. Jace kept his breathing steady. He thought about the medical bills on his kitchen table. He thought about the leak in the roof. Correct, she said finally. The interview lasted another 40 minutes. They threw logic puzzles at him, ethical dilemmas where the right answer was always the profitable one, and technical schematics that were intentionally flawed to see if he would arrogantly correct them or politely inquire about the discrepancy. He navigated it all with the grace of a man walking a tightrope over a shark tank. At the end, the woman stood up. She tapped a command into her datapad. "Welcome to Heliox, Mr. Rowan. Your aptitude scores are in the 99th percentile for compliance and technical proficiency. Report to orientation on Monday at 0800. Jace stood up, his knees feeling weak with relief. "Thank you. You will not regret this." "We never regret our acquisitions," she said. "We merely liquidate the ones that do not perform." Jace walked out of the tower and felt like he could fly without a gravity belt. He had done it. He was in... The weight of the last 5 years seemed to evaporate off his shoulders. He pulled out his comm to call his mother, his thumb hovering over the call button. But he stopped. He wanted to tell her in person. He wanted to bring home a real dinner, maybe fresh protein instead of the nutrient paste they usually ate, and celebrate. He took the express lift down to the transit plaza, a sprawling hub where the high society sectors bled into the mid-level commercial zones. It was a chaotic, vibrant mess of species and commerce. Neon advertisements floated in the air, selling everything from vacation memories to illegal cybernetic enhancements. Jace was halfway across the plaza, dodging a hover cart selling spicy tubers, when the atmosphere shifted. The ambient noise of the crowd, the chatter, the music, the hum of engines suddenly dropped. It was the sound of collective curiosity turning into collective fear. Jace looked toward the center of the plaza, near a fountain that recycled gray water into artistic arcs. A circle had formed. 3 private security drones hovered about 10 feet in the air, their red sensory eyes locked on a target below. 2 human guards, wearing the heavy armored vests of a private enforcement firm, were shouting. "Stay on the ground," one guard yelled, his hand resting on the shock baton at his belt. Jace should have kept walking. Eris's voice was in his head. Obedience over courage. Do not be a hero. He had the job. He had the future. He just had to walk to the train. But he looked. The target of the aggression was a girl. She was humanoid, tall and slender, wearing a long hooded cloak that looked like it was woven from shadows. The hood had fallen back, revealing pale violet skin and hair that shimmered like spun silver. She was alien, clearly, but of a species Jace did not immediately recognize. She did not look like a thief. She looked terrified, but beneath the terror, there was a rigid, frozen dignity. She held her hands up, palms open. "I have told you," she said, her voice clear and melodic, cutting through the noise. "My identification token is malfunctioning. I am not trying to evade payment, standard excuse for a grifter." The second guard spat. "The scanner says you don't exist, sweetheart. And that tech you're wearing, that scrambler mesh on your wrist, that's illegal in this sector." "It is personal protection," she said. "It is contraband," the guard corrected. He unclipped a device from his belt. It was a neural restraint collar, a nasty piece of hardware that locked onto the nervous system and paralyzed the victim with waves of agony. It was meant for riot control, not for a transit dispute. The crowd had their devices out. Hundreds of lenses were focused on the scene, live streaming the altercation to the planetary network. No one moved to help. They were content to watch the show. The guard stepped forward, the collar humming with a menacing blue charge. "Turn around and get on your knees." "I will not," the girl said. Jace watched her hand twitch. She did something with her fingers, a subtle, complex gesture near her waist. The drones overhead wobbled, their stabilizers glitching for a microsecond. She was doing something to their tech, jamming them with a device he couldn't see. It was brilliant, but it wasn't going to stop the 200 pounds of armored muscle walking toward her. The guard raised the collar. "We are doing this the hard way." Jace's feet moved before his brain signed the permission slip. He broke through the line of onlookers. He didn't run. Running made you look guilty. He walked fast, with the clipped, annoyed stride of a mid-level bureaucrat who was late for a meeting. "Hey!" Jace shouted, pitching his voice to Carrie. "Who is the shift supervisor here?" The guard froze, blinking at the interruption. Jace stepped between the guard and the alien girl. He turned his back to the girl, facing the guard, effectively becoming a human shield. "Who are you?" the guard demanded, lowering the collar slightly but not deactivating it. "I am a concerned citizen who knows the municipal code better than you do." "Apparently," Jace said. He pointed a finger at the neural collar. "That is a Class 4 restraint device. Usage of Class 4 hardware in a civilian transit zone without a confirmed violent threat is a violation of Sector Statute 99. The girl behind him remained silent, but he could feel the heat radiating from her. She was tense, coiled like a spring. "She's resisting arrest," the guard growled. "She's got illegal tech. She is standing still with her hands visible," Jace countered, his voice dripping with the kind of sarcastic authority he usually saved for incompetent service bots. "That is compliance. And if you put that collar on her, every single one of these cameras is going to record a lawsuit that will bankrupt your security firm before dinner." The guard hesitated. He looked at the drones, then at the crowd, then at Jace. The sheer audacity of Jace's interference had thrown off his rhythm. Jace glanced over his shoulder. The girl was looking at him. Her eyes were gold, bright and piercing, with vertical pupils that widened in surprise. "Go," Jace whispered, barely moving his lips. "I cannot," she whispered back. "They have locked the perimeter sensors." The second guard circled around. "You are obstructing justice, kid. You want to join her?" "I want you to follow the law," Jace said. "Run a secondary buy scan. If her ID is glitching, use the manual reader. You are escalating to torture because you are too lazy to do the paperwork." The head guard's face turned a violent shade of red. He stepped into Jace's personal space, the ozone smell of the charged collar making the hair on Jace's arms stand up. "I am going to count to 3, the guard said low. "You walk away, or I charge you with anti-corporate agitation. You know what that does to a record? You'll never work in this sector again." Jace's heart hammered against his ribs. He thought of the Heliox Tower. He thought of the White Room. He thought of his mother's lungs. He had the job. He just had to step aside, just one step to the left, and he keeps the future he earned. He looked at the girl. She wasn't looking at the guards anymore. She was looking at him, waiting to see what the human would do. There was no pleading in her eyes, just a silent measurement of his character. Jace looked back at the guard. He saw the bully behind the badge. He saw the same cruelty that kept his neighborhood poor and his father in an early grave. "1," the guard said. Jace planted his feet. 2. "I am not moving," Jace said. The guard sneered. "You're an idiot." He raised his voice for the cameras. "This individual is aiding a fugitive." The guard shoved Jace hard. Jace stumbled back, colliding with the girl. He felt her steady him, her grip surprisingly strong. "Why are you doing this?" she murmured. "Because I'm an idiot, apparently," Jace muttered. He looked straight into the nearest news drone, his face filling the frame on screens across the city. "I lost my job opportunity for helping an alien girl, and I would do it again." The guard lunged. Jace braced himself for the shock of the baton, but the air suddenly exploded with light. It wasn't a weapon, it was a distraction. A canister dropped from the upper walkway, detonated in a cloud of thick silver smoke and high-frequency sound. The drone spiraled out of control, crashing into the fountain. The crowd screamed and scattered. Jace coughed, waving his hand in front of his face. He felt a hand squeeze his shoulder, brief, firm, acknowledging. And then she was gone. Figures emerged from the smoke, armored in sleek, unmarked gray gear. They moved with military precision, surrounding the spot where the girl had been. They weren't security, they were extraction. They grabbed her, shielded her, and vanished into the ventilation tunnels before the smoke even cleared. Jace was left standing alone in the haze. He wasn't rescued. The guards grabbed him before the smoke dissipated. He didn't fight. There was no point. He didn't spend the night in jail, which was a small mercy. The security firm didn't want the paperwork any more than he did, especially since the fugitive had escaped, and the footage of Jace reciting the law was already trending on 3 different platforms. They scanned his ID, issued him a citation for civil disruption, and kicked him out onto the street. Jace sat on a bench outside the precinct, watching the city lights blur in the smog. He checked his comm. 1 new message. Sender, Heliox Human Resources. He opened it. The holographic text projected into the cool night air. Mr. Rowan, regarding your offer of employment, a review of your public conduct profile has flagged a significant incompatibility with Heliox core values. We require discretion and stability in our associates. Your offer is hereby rescinded. Do not reply to this message. He stared at the words until they started to swim. He walked home. The apartment he shared with his mother was in a block called The Stacks, a towering hive of modular units that rattled whenever a heavy freighter broke atmosphere overhead. He entered quietly. His mother was asleep in the main room, her breathing machine humming its rhythmic, wheezing tune. Jace stood over her for a moment, listening to the sound of the money he didn't have. He went into his small room and collapsed onto the bed. He pulled up the network feed. It was everywhere. The clip of him standing in front of the alien girl. The headline, "The Samaritan of Sector 4?" or "Anti-Corp Anarchist?" The comments were brutal. Idiot threw away a career for a stray. Typical lower-tier behavior. No respect for authority. Anyone recognize the girl? Looks like high-end gene mod. He's cute, but he's unemployed now. Rape. Jace groaned and covered his face with a pillow. He had ruined everything. For a stranger. For a girl he didn't know, who had vanished without even telling him her name. The next morning was a blur of humiliation. He tried to contact Heliox to appeal. He spent 4 hours in a virtual reality queue, standing in a digital lobby with smooth jazz playing on a loop. When he finally got through, it wasn't a person. It was an AI avatar that looked like a friendly cartoon owl. I understand you are frustrated. The owl hooted pleasantly. But our policy on public agitation is strict. Have you considered a career in waste reclamation? I was top of my class in systems analysis, Jace shouted at the hologram. I stopped a guard from torturing someone. That is justice. I am sorry, the owl said, blinking its large eyes. Did you say juice? I show no results for juice vendors in your area. Jace disconnected the call before he punched his wall. The day dragged on. His friends from the academy sent awkward messages. The kind that said heard what happened and that sucks but offered no help. They were distancing themselves. Contagion was real in the corporate world, and Jace was patient zero. By evening, the apartment was dark. His mother was still resting. The bad air quality today had been hard on her. Jace sat at his desk, staring at a half-eaten protein bar. He was running calculations on how long they could survive on his savings. 2 weeks. Maybe 3 if they didn't eat on Tuesdays. There was a tap at his window. Jace froze. He was on the 40th floor. There were no walkways outside his window. He stood up slowly, grabbing a heavy hydro spanner from his toolkit. He approached the glass. A figure was crouching on the narrow maintenance ledge outside, clinging to the rain-slicked surface with magnetic gloves. It was her. Jace unlocked the latch and slid the window open. The wind howled into the room, carrying the scent of rain and exhaust. "Are you insane?" Jace hissed. "You're going to fall." The girl slipped inside, moving with a fluid grace that made the difficult entry look like a dance step. She was soaking wet. The cloak was gone, replaced by a dark, utilitarian bodysuit that looked expensive. Her silver hair was plastered to her violet skin. She straightened up and pulled the hood of her jacket down. Her gold eyes scanned the room, taking in the cramped space, the peeling paint, the tech manuals stacked on the floor. "You live high up," she said. "It is a good vantage point." Jace gripped the hydro spanner tighter. "Who are you? And why are you at my house? If the cops find you here, they will not," she said calmly. I scrambled the building's sensors before I climbed the wall. "You are invisible to the grid right now." She looked at him, her expression softening slightly. "I came to thank you," she said, "and to settle a debt." "I don't want your thanks," Jace said, the anger bubbling up. He tossed the spanner onto the desk with a clatter. "Do you know what you cost me?" "I had a job, a real job. I lost it because I stepped in for you." "I know," she said. "I saw the news feeds. I lost my job opportunity for helping an alien girl." It was dramatic. It was the truth, Jace snapped. Lyra reached into a pocket on her belt. She pulled out a small hexagonal token. It pulsed with a faint violet light. "This is a data-bearer bond," she said, holding it out. "It contains encrypted access to a slush fund used by off-world traders. There are 5,000 credits on this key. It is untraceable." Jace stared at the token. 5,000 credits. That was more than the annual salary at Heliox. That was the lung surgery. That was a new apartment. That was freedom. He looked at her face. She expected him to take it. She expected him to be bought. He felt a flash of indignation that surprised him. "I didn't help you for money," he said. "Take it," she said, pushing it toward him. "It is not charity. It is compensation. You saved me from significant inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" Jace laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "They were going to fry your nervous system. And you call it an inconvenience? Who are you?" She hesitated. "My name is Lyra. Just Lyra. Just Lyra." Jace looked at the token again. He wanted it. God, he wanted it. But taking it felt like admitting that his integrity had a price tag. It felt like admitting he was just another mercenary in a city of mercenaries. "Keep it," Jace said. Lyra blinked. Her composure cracked for the first time. "You are in debt. I accessed your public financial records. You need this. You hacked my records." Jace stepped closer, his annoyance overriding his fear. "Look, lady, I helped you because it was the right thing to do. If I take your money, then I didn't do it because it was right. I did it because I was paid, and I am not a hireling." Lyra studied him. The silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of the city outside and the tension in the room. She looked at his shabby clothes, his defiant jaw, his tired eyes. A small, amused smile touched her lips. "You are a strange human, Jace Rowan, and you are a trouble magnet, Lyra Vey," he retorted. She stiffened. "I did not tell you my surname." "I can read basic code," Jace said, gesturing to the datapad on his desk. "When you jammed the drones yesterday, your signature ghosted on the local frequency for a split second." "Vey, that's an Outer Rim dialect, right?" Lyra's eyes narrowed, but there was a spark of interest there now. Curiosity. You are observant, she said. That is dangerous. She pocketed the token. Fine. If you will not take the money, perhaps you will accept a job. Jace scoffed. A job? Doing what? Running from security guards? I've had enough of that for one lifetime. Not running, she said. Hunting. She walked over to his window and looked out at the sprawling, glittering skyline of the city. I was not stealing yesterday. Jace. I was recovering data. The Heliox Consortium is not just a company. They are a parasite. They are bleeding the outer sectors dry to fuel their expansion here. I am gathering evidence to prove it. Jace felt a cold chill. Heliox. The company he had almost worked for. Why are you telling me this? Because I need a local guide, she said, turning back to him. I know the high-level protocols, but I do not know the streets. I do not know how to blend in. You do. You have a talent for improvisation, and you clearly have a problem with authority. I don't have a problem with authority, Jace muttered. I have a problem with bullies. Same thing, Lyra said. She stepped closer to him. The smell of rain and ozone was stronger now. She was shorter than him, but she projected a presence that made her feel 10 feet tall. Give me 1 week, she said. Help me navigate the lower levels. Help me decipher the local data nodes. In exchange, I will give you enough data to clear your name and expose the people who fired you. Jace looked at her. He saw the danger in her eyes. He saw the way she stood, like a soldier, not a thief. She was dangerous. Being around her was going to get him killed. But then he thought about the owl avatar. He thought about the white room. He thought about the guard with the shock collar. He looked at the empty space where his career used to be. 1 week, Jace said. 1 week, Lyra confirmed. And no more jumping off buildings unless absolutely necessary. Lyra smiled, and for a second, the room felt brighter. I can make no promises regarding gravity. She extended her hand. It was a human gesture, executed with a slightly alien formality. Jace took it. Her skin was cool to the touch, her grip firm. Their eyes met, and Jace felt a sudden, electric lurch in his chest, a warning and a promise all at once. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, and he had just decided to jump. We start now, she said. Jace grabbed his jacket. Of course we do. He followed her out the window and into the rain. The sensation of the upgrade was less like a medical procedure and more like having a bucket of liquid nitrogen poured directly into the base of his skull. Jace Rowan grit his teeth, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of his kitchen table. The air in his apartment smelled of ozone and antiseptic spray. Behind him, Lyra Vey worked with the steady, terrifying precision of a machine. Her fingers moved faster than he could track, manipulating a needle-thin device that hovered just above his data port. Hold still, Lyra commanded softly. If you flinch, I might accidentally overwrite your motor functions with a recipe for synthetic stew. Jace froze. That is a joke, right? Lyra did not answer. There was a sharp, high-pitched whine, a sudden flare of white light behind his eyes, and then the pressure vanished. Done, she said, stepping back. Jace blinked. For a moment, the room looked the same. The peeling gray paint, the flickering light strip, the pile of unwashed laundry in the corner. Then he blinked again, and the world peeled back its skin. Streams of data cascaded over the walls like digital rain. He could see the power conduits pulsing behind the plaster, glowing with a soft amber light. He looked out the window and gasped. The air outside was alive. Traffic lanes were visible ribbons of blue energy. Security drones left trails of red vapor in their wake. He could see the encryption level of the building across the street simply by focusing on it. It is micro-lattice architecture, Lyra explained, wiping her instrument with a cloth. Standard issue for high-level fieldwork. It layers the unseen infrastructure of the city over your optical nerve. You are not just seeing the physical world anymore. Jace, you are seeing the machine that runs it. Jace touched the back of his neck. The skin felt cool, seamless. You just put a military-grade spy computer in my head, he said, turning to look at her. You said you were an independent oversight agent. This tech costs more than this entire block. Who funds you? The ghost of a billionaire? Lyra looked away, busy packing her kit. Her movements were graceful, too economical for someone who merely inspected factories. I have wealthy backers, she said, her voice smooth and practiced. There are people in the core worlds who care about what happens on the frontier. They prefer to remain anonymous. Jace watched her. He had spent his life fixing broken systems, tracing faults in machinery that didn't want to work. He knew a misalignment when he saw one. Lyra Vey wore her anonymity like a costume that didn't quite fit. She stood with her spine too straight. She gave orders like she expected the universe to obey them instantly. Wealthy backers, Jace repeated. Right. He didn't push it. He had agreed to 1 week. The first test of his new eyes came 2 nights later. The Heliox Consortium was hosting its annual Unity Gala at the Spire, a needle of crystalline steel that pierced the upper atmosphere. It was a place where gravity was a suggestion and wealth was a physical law. We need the ledger, Lyra had said during their briefing. Director Kalen keeps a physical backup of his off-book accounts in his private viewing gallery at the gala. If my intel is correct, that ledger proves Heliox is funding the Red Sun militia. Getting in required more than a ticket. It required Lyra's tech. She had given Jace a photonic veil, a small emitter clipped to his lapel that scrambled facial recognition software. To the cameras, he was a blur of static. To the guests, he was just another face in a sea of faces. Jace tugged at the collar of his borrowed formal wear. It was a midnight blue tunic with gold threading, stiff and uncomfortable. He felt like a fraud wrapped in expensive silk. Stop fidgeting, Lyra murmured. Her voice was in his ear, transmitted directly through the new implant. You look fine. I look like a waiter who stole a suit, Jace muttered back, keeping his lips barely moving. He glanced at her and felt his breath hitch. Lyra was wearing a gown of shifting iridescent fabric that looked like liquid starlight. Her silver hair was pinned up in an elaborate, architectural style, exposing the long, elegant line of her neck. She didn't just walk. She glided. The crowd parted for her not because they knew who she was, but because she moved as if she owned the floor they stood on. They entered the grand atrium, a cavernous hall with a floor made of transparent glass, revealing the city lights dizzying miles below. Jace stuck close to her, his eyes darting around the room, reading the data overlays. He saw security grids, hidden weapon scanners, and the personal net worth of every guest floating above their heads. Act like you belong, Lyra whispered. I am trying, Jace whispered back. But I just saw a guy whose shoes are worth more than my mother's life. It is distracting. A waiter drifted by with a tray of floating beverages. Jace reached for one, missed the timing of the anti-grav field, and nearly knocked the glass into a duke's chest. He caught it with a desperate lunge, flashing a grin that was half panic, half charm. Reflex test, Jace said to the startled Duke. You passed. Congratulations. He hurried away before the Duke could respond. Lyra was waiting for him near a sculpture of jagged obsidian. She was speaking with an elderly man wearing the sash of a planetary governor. As Jace approached, he saw the governor bow. It wasn't a polite nod. It was a deep, formal bow from the waist, the kind reserved for royalty or gods. "Your insight is profound, my lady," the governor was saying, his voice trembling slightly. "I will consider your words." He backed away, keeping his head lowered. Jace frowned. Independent agents didn't get bowed to by governors. "He thinks you're someone else," Jace said as he reached her. "People see what they expect to see," Lyra said, her face impassive. "The gallery is this way." They moved toward the private elevators. Jace's new eyes highlighted the laser grid barring the entrance. "Class 5 security," Jace noted. "Biometric locks, retinal scan, voice print. We can't get in there." Lyra stepped up to the panel. She didn't pull out a hacking tool. She didn't use a scrambler. She simply placed her hand on the console and whispered a string of words in a language Jace didn't recognize. It sounded ancient, harsh and lyrical all at once. The console flashed green. The lasers vanished. The doors slid open. Jace stared at her. "Override code," she said briefly, stepping inside. "That wasn't code," Jace said, following her. "That was a poem. It was a root access syntax. Stop asking questions. Jace, we are on the clock." The viewing gallery was a museum of ego. Director Kalen collected artifacts from worlds Heliox had conquered, shards of holy temples, weapons of extinct tribes, and in the center, a desk made of petrified wood from a forest that no longer existed. The ledger was in the desk. Jace went to work. He used the micro-lattice sight to see the locking mechanism inside the wood. It was an old-school mechanical tumbler reinforced with a digital kill switch. "I need 90 seconds, Jace said, pulling a magnetic pick from his cuff. "You have 60, Lyra said, standing guard by the door. Jace worked. He felt the sweat trickling down his back. The lock was a masterpiece of paranoia. Click, click. He bypassed the digital tripwire. Click, got it. He pulled the drawer open. Inside sat a heavy leather-bound book, analog, unhackable. He grabbed it and shoved it into his tunic. "We are clear," Jace said. The room turned red. A silent alarm. Lyra hissed. They bypassed the local alert and went straight to Central Command. "Run!" They sprinted out of the gallery, but the elevator was locked down. "The service stairs!" Jace shouted, pointing to a door his overlay highlighted in orange. They burst into the stairwell just as the main doors hissed open and 3 security drones floated in, weapons charged. They ran up, not down. The roof was the only exit that wasn't sealed. They emerged into the rooftop gardens, a sprawling landscape of bioluminescent trees and floating water spheres held in place by anti-gravity fields. The wind whipped at them, cold and thin. Guards were pouring out of the access hatches on the far side. "There!" Lyra pointed to a maintenance skiff docked at the edge of the platform. They ran across the glass walkway. Laser fire zipped past them, sizzling against the leaves of the alien trees. A bolt struck the walkway in front of Lyra, shattering the glass. She stumbled, sliding toward the edge. "Lyra!" Jace didn't think. He dove. He caught her hand just as she went over. The drop was 4,000 feet. She dangled there, the wind tearing at her dress, her eyes wide with shock. "Hold on!" Jace gritted out, bracing his feet against a metal stanchion. He hauled her up, his muscles screaming. She scrambled onto the glass, breathless. "Thank you," she gasped. "Save the gratitude," Jace said, pulling her to her feet. "We are pinned down." The guards were advancing, using the trees for cover. There was no way to get to the skiff without being shot. Jace looked at the floating water spheres. They were massive, suspended by gravity nodes embedded in the walkway. "Do you trust me?" Jace asked. Lyra looked at the guards, then at him. Oddly, yes. Jace pulled his magnetic pick and jammed it into the nearest gravity node. He twisted it violently, reversing the polarity. "Get down!" he yelled. The node whined and exploded. The anti-gravity field inverted. Instead of floating, the water spheres crashed down with the force of a tidal wave, sweeping the guards off their feet and sending them sliding across the slick glass. At the same time, the local gravity around the node spiked, pulling the guards flat against the ground. Jace and Lyra, outside the radius, were hit by the spray but stayed standing. "Move!" Jace shouted. They scrambled to the skiff. Lyra hot-wired the ignition while Jace fired a few suppressing shots with a stun pistol he had grabbed from a fallen guard. The skiff roared to life. They shot away from the spire, diving into the neon canyons of the city just as the heavy security shuttles arrived. They ditched the skiff in the lower sectors and transferred to Lyra's ship, a sleek, unmarked courier vessel hidden in a derelict hangar. Once they were in orbit, safe in the black silence of space, the adrenaline finally crashed. Jace slumped into the co-pilot's seat, tearing at the collar of his tunic. He was soaked, bruised, and exhausted. He started to laugh, a shaky, breathless sound. "Did you see their faces?" he wheezed. "When the water hit them, it was kinetic poetry." Lyra was pacing the small cabin, stripping off her ruined gloves. She wasn't laughing. She looked shaken, not by the danger, but by the fall. "You saved my life," she said quietly. Jace waved a hand. "You saved mine with the upgrade. We are even." "No," she said, stopping in front of him. "You could have run to the skiff. You came back for me." "Why?" Jace looked at her. Her hair was coming loose, framing her face in silver strands. She looked less like an imperious agent and more like a young woman who had seen too much. "Because you are my partner," Jace said simply. "For the week, anyway." Lyra sat down on the edge of the navigation console. Her shoulders slumped. "Partner." She tested the word. "It sounds strange. Why?" "You must have worked with teams before." "I have worked with subordinates," she said, "and protectors, and subjects, never a partner." She looked at her hands. "Everyone I know sees the rank, the potential. They see what I can do for them or what I represent. They do not see me. When I fell, for a second I thought, this is it. I will die and the Empire will mourn a symbol, but no one will miss the girl." Jace leaned forward. The banter was gone. "I don't care about your rank. Lyra, I don't care if you are a super spy or a runaway princess or the Emperor's personal chef. I saw a girl who was brave enough to stand up to a tank with nothing but her hands. That is who I pulled up from the ledge." Lyra looked up. Her golden eyes locked onto his. The air in the cockpit suddenly felt very thin and very charged. It was the same feeling as standing next to the reactor core, a hum of dangerous magnetic power. "Jace Rowan," she whispered. "You are a dangerous distraction." She leaned in. Jace didn't pull away. He could smell the rain and the ozone on her skin. He saw the flecks of violet in her irises. The distance between them closed to inches. He could feel the warmth radiating from her. A sharp, urgent beep from the console shattered the moment. Lyra jerked back as if she had been burned. She spun around to the screen. "It is a proximity alert," she said, her voice unsteady. "We have arrived at the coordinates from the ledger." Jace let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He ran a hand through his hair, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Right," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "The coordinates. Let's see what Heliox was hiding." The coordinates led them to the asteroid belt, specifically to a rock designated Mining Outpost 88 Beta. It was a dead rock, tumbling through the dark. There were no lights, no beacons. But Jace's new eyes saw the heat signatures of active ventilation shafts buried deep beneath the surface. This isn't a mine, Jace said as they docked the ship to a rusted airlock. The power draw is too low for extraction machinery, but too high for life support. They entered the facility with weapons drawn. The air inside was stale and cold. It was a labyrinth of gray corridors and steel doors. It wasn't a mine. It was a prison. They found the cells on the third sublevel, rows of glass cages, each containing a sentient being. Humans, Tellarites, even a few rare species Jace had only seen in textbooks. They were all asleep, suspended in a translucent gel. Wires trailed from their skulls, connecting them to a central server bank. Lyra moved to a terminal. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "Look at this," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Jace looked at the screen. Subject 104, neural conditioning, phase 3, loyalty imprint 89%, memory suppression complete. "They are reprogramming them," Jace whispered, horror washing over him. "Heliox isn't just funding a militia. They are building one. These people, they are being brainwashed to be soldiers." He saw a name on the list, Mila Kren. He knew that name. She was a systems engineer who had disappeared from Sector 4 last year. Everyone thought she had moved off-world. "They stole people," Jace said, "regular people, and they turned them into puppets." Lyra's hands gripped the console so hard the metal groaned. "This is a violation of the Treaty of Sentience," she said. "It is a violation of the Imperial Charter. It is an abomination." She turned to Jace. Her eyes were burning. It wasn't just anger. It was a terrifying judicial wrath. It was the look of someone who had the power to order orbital bombardments. "We are taking the data," she said. "All of it. And then we are waking them up." They worked in silence for an hour, downloading terabytes of incriminating logs. Jace found the emergency release protocols. "When I hit this, the gel drains, and they wake up," Jace said. "It's going to be chaotic." "Do it," Lyra said. Jace keyed the command. Throughout the hall, the glass pods hissed. The gel drained away. The subjects coughed, gasping for air, ripping the wires from their heads. Confusion, fear, crying. Jace and Lyra moved among them, offering water, blankets, and reassurance. "You are safe," Lyra told a terrified Tellarite woman. "The Empire has found you. You are safe." Jace watched her. She commanded the room effortlessly. She organized the survivors, assigned tasks to the ones who were strong enough, and comforted the ones who were broken. It was leadership, pure and instinctive. When the survivors were secured in the cargo bay of a transport shuttle they found in the hangar, Jace and Lyra retreated to the mess hall to wait for the automated extraction signal to clear. They sat at a metal table, surrounded by the ghosts of the atrocities committed here. Jace found a packet of vacuum-sealed rations in a cupboard. "Dinner is served," he said, tossing a packet to Lyra. She opened it and sniffed. "It smells like despair." "It's nutrient paste," Jace said, tearing his open, high protein, zero flavor, the breakfast of champions. He squeezed a glob of gray sludge into his mouth. He immediately gagged. It tasted like wet cardboard mixed with battery acid. He coughed, his eyes watering, pounding his chest. "Oh, gods," he wheezed. That is a crime against taste buds. I think I preferred the neural conditioning." Lyra stared at him. Then, a small sound escaped her lips, a snort. Then she laughed. It wasn't a polite, courtly titter. It was a full, deep belly laugh. She laughed until she had to wipe tears from her eyes. Jace grinned, wiping the sludge from his chin. "You are laughing at my suffering. I am laughing because you look like a pufferfish." She gasped. It was the first time he had seen her truly relaxed. The mask was gone. The weight of the galaxy was gone. For 10 seconds, they were just two young people eating bad food in a dark room. The moment was broken by the chirp of Lyra's data pad. She stopped laughing instantly. She pulled the device from her belt. A coded message scrolled across the screen. The golden cage has a leak. The silver court knows the bird is flying. They have dispatched the shadows. Run! Lyra went pale. What is it? Jace asked. The levity vanishing. She looked up at him, fear warring with resolve in her eyes. We have to go, she said. Now. Someone in the palace knows I am here. Who? The people who want me dead, she said. She stood up, the command returning to her posture, but her hand lingered on the table near his for a second before she pulled away. The hunt has just begun. Jace. And I am afraid I have just made you a target. Jace stood up, grabbing his gear. I told you, he said, managing a grim smile. I'm an idiot. I'd do it again. Lyra looked at him, a profound sadness in her eyes. I hope you survive long enough to regret that, she said. They ran for the ship as the sensors picked up the signature of a stealth cruiser entering the sector. The slipspace drive hummed with a low, vibrating frequency that rattled the fillings in Jace Rowan's teeth. He sat in the co-pilot seat of the courier vessel, staring at the star field stretching into infinity. The beauty of it was lost on him. All he could see was the memory of the glass cages in the asteroid facility and the hollow eyes of the people inside. He looked over at Lyra. She was hunched over the navigation console, the blue light of the holographic display carving sharp shadows across her face. She had not slept in 20 hours. She looked like a statue carved from exhaustion and resolve. You are staring, Lyra said without looking up. I am thinking, Jace corrected. About what? About how a mining corporation has enough military hardware to equip a small army, Jace said. He unbuckled his harness and swiveled the chair to face her. Heliox is a logistics company. Lyra, they move freight. They manage shipping lanes. They do not run black site detention centers and brainwash citizens. This is too big for a corporate balance sheet. Lyra froze. Her hand hovered over the controls for a second before she deactivated the map and turned to him. The cabin was dim, lit only by the instrument panels. You are right, she said softly. It is not just corporate greed, it is political mechanics. She tapped a command into the console, a new image projected into the air between them. It was a complex web of connections, names, faces, credit transfers, and insignias. At the center sat the Heliox logo, linked to 3 other nodes. 2 of these are planetary governors in the outer rim, Lyra explained, pointing to the austere faces of 2 men Jace recognized from news feeds. And this, she pointed to a stylized silver crest, a hawk gripping a fractured moon. This is the Silver Court, Jace frowned. That sounds like a bad Holovid villain organization. It is a faction within the Imperial Palace, Lyra said, her voice deadly serious. They are traditionalists, isolationists. They believe the Emperor has become weak, that his policies of integration and open borders are diluting the strength of the core systems. They want a return to the old ways. Iron rule, human supremacy. Jace felt a cold knot form in his stomach. And Heliox? Heliox is their bank, Lyra said. The Silver Court provides the political cover. Heliox provides the funding and the personnel. Those people we found, they were not just being conditioned. They were being trained as a private enforcement arm, a shadow army that answers only to the court. Jace sat back, the breath leaving his lungs. A coup, he whispered. They are planning a coup. Lyra nodded. Her golden eyes were dark. They do not just want to change the laws, Jace. They want to change the ruler. The ship suddenly shuddered, dropping out of slipspace with a jarring thud. The proximity alarms blared. "We are here," Lyra announced, her fingers flying across the controls to stabilize the vessel. Jace looked out the viewport and saw a graveyard. They were floating above a moon that looked like it had been cracked open by a giant hammer. Debris rings circled it in lazy, dangerous arcs. On the surface, half buried in gray dust, lay the skeletal remains of a city. Towers of twisted metal poked up like broken fingers. "Where are we?" Jace asked. "The moon of Oros," Lyra said. "It was abandoned a century ago after a tectonic collapse. Now, it is a dead zone." "Why are we visiting a dead zone?" "Because the dead keep secrets better than the living," she replied. "There is a group of rebel archivists who operate here. They store data that the Empire wants erased. If there is proof of the Silver Court's timeline, it will be in their vault." She guided the ship down. The landing was rough. The atmosphere of Oros was thin and charged with erratic electromagnetic storms. As they descended, the ship's sensors began to scream. Ghost signals filled the screens, phantom readings of ships that weren't there. Terrain that shifted, heat signatures that vanished as soon as they appeared. "Memory fog," Lyra murmured, fighting the yoke. "The electromagnetic field here traps old data transmissions. It replays the past like a loop. It confuses the targeting computers." She slammed the landing gear down. The ship hit the dust hard, skidding to a halt near the entrance of a collapsed subway tunnel. "The systems are fried," Lyra said, unbuckling. "We have to walk from here." They suited up in environmental gear, sleek, armored coats with rebreathers. The air outside was toxic, heavy with metallic dust. As they stepped onto the surface, Jace felt the static in the air prickle against his skin. The memory fog was literal. Swirls of charged particles danced around them. Occasionally, the fog would coalesce into a shape, a flickering, ghostly image of a person walking a dog, or a hover car that had crashed 50 years ago. It was like walking through a haunted house built of electricity. "My scanner is useless," Jace said, tapping his wrist comp. "It is reading 3,000 life forms, and I am pretty sure we are the only ones here with a pulse." Lyra pulled a device from her pack. It looked like a tuning fork made of black glass. "Use your eyes, Jace. The micro-lattice I gave you. It filters raw data. Look for the pattern that does not repeat. The fog loops. The path to the archive will be constant." Jace activated his implant. The world shifted. The gray dust became a grid of blue lines. The ghostly figures became bursts of static code. He squinted, scanning the chaotic landscape. "There," he said, pointing to a faint, steady pulse of amber light weaving through the wreckage of a skyscraper. "That signal is stable. Lead the way," Lyra said. They moved through the ruins. It was an eerie trek, silent, except for the crunch of their boots and the crackle of the storms overhead. They had to move in tandem, Jace calling out the safe path through the unstable magnetic fields. Lyra using her device to create a localized dampening bubble that kept their suits from shorting out. At one point, a massive beam of steel groaned and shifted above them. Lyra grabbed Jace's harness and yanked him back a second before tons of metal crashed where he had been standing. "Nice reflexes," Jace panted. "You walk too loud," she retorted, but her hand lingered on his arm for a moment to ensure he was steady. They reached the archive entrance, a heavy blast door concealed beneath a fallen statue of an old war hero. Lyra used her override syntax again, that strange, poetic code language, and the doors groaned open. Inside, the air was filtered and cool. The archive was a massive, cylindrical chamber lined with servers that hummed with a low, ancient power. In the center sat a single terminal. Lyra moved to it immediately. She plugged in the data token they had stolen from the gala, cross-referencing the ledger with the archive transmission logs. She muttered, "If the Silver Court is communicating with the governors, the handshake protocols will be here." Jace stood guard, watching the shadows. The silence of the tomb was heavy. "Got it," Lyra whispered. Jace joined her at the console. A holographic recording flickered to life. It was grainy, degraded by the magnetic storms, but the audio was clear. A voice, smooth and cultured, spoke from the darkness. "The Emperor's health is declining faster than anticipated. The timeline must be accelerated. Phase 4 is approved. Initiate the Regency protocol." An image appeared next to the audio. It was a dossier. A picture of a young man, handsome, with a jawline that inspired trust and eyes that radiated calm. Subject, Lord Valerius, Regent Designate. Jace leaned closer, his enhanced eyes scanning the biometric data scrolling beneath the portrait. "Wait," Jace said. "Freeze that frame." Lyra paused the hologram. "Look at his genetic markers." Jace pointed at chromosome pairs 12 and 23. They are perfectly symmetrical. Nature doesn't do that. Even in high-born bloodlines, there are variances. This code, it is looped, it is copied. He looked at Lyra. "He is not a person. He is a clone, a vat-grown human designed to look like a noble." Lyra's face went white. "A puppet," she whispered. "They are not just installing a figurehead. They are manufacturing a fake heir to take the throne while the Emperor is incapacitated. A stability regent who will sign whatever order the Silver Court puts in front of him." "This is treason," Jace said. "High treason. If we broadcast this..." The lights in the archive died. Absolute darkness flooded the room, followed instantly by the crimson wash of emergency strobes. Jace's heart hammered. What happened? "They found us," Lyra said, her voice dropping to a combat cadence. "How?" "We were careful. The transmission," she hissed. "It was a honeypot. As soon as I accessed the file, it pinged a tracker. Movement in the shadows. They were not alone. Figures detached themselves from the darkness near the door. They were sleek, clad in armor that seemed to drink the red light of the emergency strobes. No faces, just smooth black helmets with a single vertical slit of glowing white light. "Shadows," Lyra said, pulling a collapsible baton from her belt that snapped into a long, humming electro-staff. "Elite extraction operatives. They do not take prisoners." "Jace." There were 4 of them. They moved with unnatural speed, silent as smoke. One lunged at Jace. He scrambled back, fumbling for the stun pistol he had kept from the gala. He fired blindly. The bolt hit the Shadow's chest plate and dissipated harmlessly. The operative raised a jagged vibro blade. Jace ducked, the blade slicing the air where his neck had been. He kicked out, aiming for the knee, a street-fighting trick. The Shadow stumbled but didn't fall. Then Lyra was there. She moved like a hurricane. She vaulted over the central console, her staff spinning in a blur of blue light. She struck the Shadow attacking Jace, a precise, devastating blow to the helmet that shattered the sensor array. The operative collapsed. 2 more rushed her. Lyra didn't retreat. She danced between them, parrying strikes that would have cut a normal person in half. She moved with a fluid, terrifying elegance, a mix of ballet and butchery. She swept the legs of one, spun, and drove the end of her staff into the solar plexus of the second. Jace watched, stunned, even as he scrambled to cover behind a server rack. Independent agents were good. He knew that. But this was a martial art form taught only in the highest academies of the core worlds. It was the fighting style of the Imperial Guard. Jace! The data! Lyra shouted, holding off the last operative. Jace snapped out of it. He grabbed the data drive from the console. "We have to go!" he yelled. More shadows were pouring in through the ceiling vents. "To the back," Lyra commanded. "There is a waste chute that leads to the lower tunnels." They ran. Jace fired wildly behind them to create suppression, while Lyra deflected plasma bolts with her spinning staff. They reached the chute and jumped, sliding down a rusted metal tube into the dark underbelly of the moon. They hit the bottom hard, rolling onto a grating that overlooked a massive ventilation shaft. The wind here was howling, sucking debris out into the vacuum of space. "Our ship is cut off," Jace shouted over the wind. "The shadows are blocking the main tunnel." "There is an emergency escape pod in the maintenance bay," Lyra yelled back, pointing to a small hatch 50 meters away. They sprinted for it. Plasma fire burned the air around them. Jace felt a sear of heat across his arm, a graze, but it hurt like fire. They reached the pod, a cramped spherical capsule meant for deep space survival. Jace threw himself into the pilot seat. Lyra dove in after him and slammed the seal. "Launch!" she screamed. Jace punched the release. Explosive bolts fired. The pod shot out of the moon's side, tumbling violently into the debris field above. The sudden acceleration pinned them to the seats. The pod spun, battered by rocks and ice. Jace fought the controls, his hands shaking, trying to stabilize their trajectory before a piece of debris cracked their hull. "Stabilizers engaged," Jace yelled. The spinning slowed. The roar of the impact dampened to a rattle. They were drifting, caught in the gravitational eddy of the asteroid belt, but alive. The silence that followed was heavy and intimate. The pod was tiny, designed for one person. It was a tight squeeze for two. Lyra was pressed against him, her shoulder wedged under his arm, her legs tangled with his. The emergency lights bathed them in a soft amber glow. Jace let out a long, ragged breath. He looked down at his arm. The sleeve of his coat was burned away, revealing a nasty red welt. "You are hurt," Lyra said. Her voice was breathless, stripped of its usual command. "I'm fine," Jace said. "Just a scratch." She reached into a compartment and pulled out a med patch. "Let me see." She peeled back the fabric. Her fingers were cool against his heated skin. She applied the patch with gentle, trembling hands. Jace watched her profile. She looked younger in the dim light. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a raw, exposed vulnerability. "Who taught you to fight like that?" Jace asked quietly. Lyra didn't look up. She kept her eyes on his arm. "I told you I have training." "That wasn't training, Lyra. That was artistry. You moved like a duelist of the inner circle. Agents investigate factories. They don't take down 4 elite assassins in close quarters." She finished with the patch and finally looked up. Her face was inches from his. In the cramped space, there was nowhere to look but at each other. "I learned to survive," she said. "That is all that matters, is it?" Jace challenged gently. "You keep secrets, Lyra, big ones. And I am sitting here, bleeding in a tin can, trusting you with my life. Don't you think I deserve a little truth?" Lyra's gaze searched his face. She looked at his messy hair, his earnest eyes, the way he hadn't pulled away from her touch. Her hand was still resting on his chest, right over his heart. She could feel it beating, fast, steady, alive. For a moment, the mask slipped completely. Her lips parted. The desire to tell him everything, who she was, why she was really here, how terrified she was, welled up in her throat. "Jace," she whispered. Her voice was a caress. The air between them seemed to vibrate. The universe narrowed down to the amber light and the scent of ozone and the warmth of her body against his. He leaned in, just a fraction. She didn't pull back. Her eyes drifted to his lips. "If I tell you," she said, her voice trembling, "you can never go back. It will put a target on you that can never be removed." "I already have a target on me," Jace murmured. "I am here. With you." He moved to close the gap. A loud, jarring ping from the console shattered the moment. Incoming transmission. Identification. Friendly. Lyra jerked back, her eyes wide. She pulled her hand from his chest and turned to the console, her breathing ragged. It is my contact," she stammered, her voice regaining its professional edge with difficulty. "We are drifting into range of the trade station." Jace sat back, running a hand over his face. He felt the loss of contact like a physical ache. "Right," he said, his voice rough. "Work first." The trade station Zentara was a chaotic hive of scum and villainy, orbiting a gas giant in neutral space. It smelled of recycled air, exotic spices, and engine grease. Jace and Lyra docked the pod and made their way to a dimly lit bar in the lower ring. Jace wore a hood pulled low. Lyra had activated a scrambling veil that made her features blur to anyone who looked too closely. They sat in a booth at the back. A moment later, a figure slid into the seat opposite them. He was a Rhodian, older, with scales that had faded to a dusty green and one cybernetic eye that whirred softly. He wore a ragged flight suit and smoked a vapor stick that smelled like cinnamon. "This is Bax," Lyra said. "The best information broker in the sector." Bax took a long drag of his vapor stick and looked at them. His cybernetic eye zoomed in on Jace, then Lyra. He let out a rasping chuckle. "You two look like you just crawled out of a garbage compactor," Bax said, "and you vibrate like a tuning fork." He gestured between them with a clawed hand. "What is it? Adrenaline? Or just the stench of unresolved sexual tension? It is disgusting. You smell like pheromones and poor decision-making." "We are here for business, Bax," Lyra said sharply, though Jace noticed a faint violet flush on her cheeks. "Business." "Right," Bax said. He tapped a command into the table surface. A holographic news feed projected up. "First item of business. You are famous, kid." Jace looked at the feed. His face, a clear high-definition shot from the Transit Plaza incident, was rotating above a block of red text. "Wanted, Jace Rowan. Classification, human extremist. Charges, terrorism, corporate sabotage, conspiracy with radical off-world elements. Bounty, 50,000 credits." 50,000, Jace said, his voice hollow. "I am worth more dead than I ever was alive." "Congratulations," Bax said dryly. "You are no longer just an unemployed mechanic. You are a political pawn. Heliox wants you painted as a terrorist, so anything you say about them sounds like insanity." "And Lyra?" Jace asked. Bax's expression darkened. He swiped the hologram to a new page. "This is worse." The headline screamed, "Noble woman compromised by radical lover." It showed a grainy image of Lyra, labeled as Lady Vey, and Jace running from the gala. The text was vicious. It claimed that Lady Vey, a respected socialite, had been seduced and brainwashed by a human extremist, leading her to commit treason against her own class. "The Silver Court is smart," Bax murmured. "They know they can't just kill a high-born woman without questions being asked. So they are destroying your reputation first. They are painting you as a victim of this human predator." Bax pointed a claw at Jace. "They are using you to discredit her," Bax said. "If she speaks out now, the public won't hear a whistleblower. They will hear a woman manipulated by her lover." Lyra stared at the screen. Her hands were clenched into fists. "They are tightening the noose," she said coldly. "They are trying to isolate me." "Well, it is working," Bax said. Every bounty hunter in 5 systems is looking for the boy, and every royal guard is looking for you, to rescue you from his clutches. Jace looked at Lyra. He saw the trap closing. If they stayed together, he endangered her. If they separated, they both died. The spy master leaned forward. If you are going to fight this, you need to hit them before they hit you, and you need to do it fast. Because right now, the only thing keeping you alive is the fact that no one knows exactly where you are. The bar door hissed open. 3 armored figures walked in, scanning the room. Backs cursed. I spoke too soon. Out the back. Now. Jace and Lyra slid out of the booth. As they moved toward the kitchen exit, Jace caught a glimpse of the newsfeed again. The image of him and Lyra frozen in a blur of motion. It didn't look like a kidnapping. It looked like 2 people against the world. He grabbed Lyra's hand. She gripped it back, hard. We run, Jace said. Always. Lyra replied. The galaxy did not burn with fire. It burned with information. The scandal traveled faster than slipspace. It leaped from the trade routes of the core worlds to the dusty mining colonies of the Rim in a matter of hours. The image of Jace Rowan and Lyra Vey, frozen in a grainy, distorted frame from the gala escape, was plastered across every holographic billboard and personal data pad in the Empire. Jace sat in the cramped mess hall of the courier ship, watching the feed scroll by on the wall monitor. The headline was written in the jagged, aggressive font of the Imperial tabloids, "The Traitor and the Tyrant." Underneath, the commentary was a torrent of vitriol. Lady Vey, a jewel of high society, corrupted by a human extremist. Jace Rowan, failed systems analyst, accused of using radical neurohypnosis to seduce and manipulate a noblewoman. It was a masterstroke by the Silver Court. They had not just framed him for a crime, they had weaponized the class divide. In the comments sections, the fracture was visible. The high-born citizens were weeping for the poor. Fallen Lyra, a victim of her own naivety and a predator's guile. The low-born citizens, the workers and the mechanics, were turning on Jace too, calling him a fool who had endangered their fragile peace for a chance to climb the social ladder. Jace switched the screen off. The silence that filled the room was heavy, broken only by the hum of the atmospheric scrubbers. He rubbed his eyes. He had not slept in 2 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shadows moving in the dark of the Moon City. He needed to check on his mother. He knew it was dangerous. Any transmission could be triangulated. But he had routed the signal through 3 bounce satellites and a pirate relay. It should be safe enough for a 30-second ping. He keyed the frequency for the Sector 4 municipal clinic. The screen flickered to life. It was not a person. It was the same automated receptionist avatar that had greeted him when he lost his job. The friendly cartoon owl. Welcome to the Sector 4 Health Network. The owl chirped. Its eyes were dead pixels. I need to check the status of patient Rowan. Elena, Jace said, his voice raspy. She was scheduled for a respiratory treatment this morning. Processing, the owl said. Jace drummed his fingers on the metal table. Please be okay. Please be okay. Alert, the owl said, its voice shifting to a harsh red warning tone. Access to medical services for patient Rowan. Elena has been suspended. Suspended? Jace stood up, knocking his chair back. Why? She has a chronic condition. If she misses a treatment, her lungs could collapse. Patient is linked to a person of interest with a Class 1 risk status, the owl recited. By order of the Regional Safety Board, all state-sponsored aid to immediate family members of the accused is frozen pending investigation. Have a nice day. The screen went black. Jace stood there, his hands shaking. They were not just hunting him. They were killing her. They were suffocating his mother to flush him out. He let out a shout of pure, impotent rage and slammed his fist into the bulkhead. The metal dented. Pain shot up his arm, but it was nothing compared to the cold dread settling in his chest. Jace. He spun around. Lyra was standing in the doorway. She was wearing a simple flight suit, stripped of her finery, but she still looked like she belonged in a palace. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with concern. "I heard you shouting," she said. "They cut her off," Jace said, his voice trembling. "My mother. They froze her medical access. She is going to die. Lyra. Because of me. Because I dragged her into this." He paced the small room, running his hands through his hair. "I have to go back. I have to surrender. If I turn myself in, maybe they will turn the machines back on." "No," Lyra said sharply. She stepped into the room. "If you surrender, they will execute you and let her die anyway, just to send a message. That is how the Silver Court operates. Cruelty is their currency." "Then what do I do?" Jace yelled, turning on her. "Watch her suffocate from orbit?" Lyra looked at him. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the raw terror of a son who was about to lose the only thing that mattered. She made a decision. "Move," she said, walking past him to the communications console. "What are you doing?" Jace asked. Lyra did not answer. She pushed him aside gently and began to type. Her fingers flew across the holographic interface. She did not use the standard encryption bypasses they had used before. She brought up a command line that Jace had never seen, a deep black screen with a single pulsing gold cursor. She typed a string of characters. It was not code. It was a sequence of biometric pulses and alphanumeric keys that looked like coordinates. Command, override, authorization, Sol Invictus Alpha 10. The screen flashed gold. Access granted. Welcome, Administrator. Lyra typed rapidly. Target Sector 4 Municipal Clinic. Action Priority Restoration. Status Imperial Ward. She hit enter. Processing. Confirmed. Treatment authorized. Medical team dispatched. Lyra exhaled slowly and stepped back. She turned to Jace. "She will be treated," Lyra said softly. "I flagged her file as a protected asset. No local governor can override it. She is safe." Jace stared at the screen. The gold letters were fading. "Sol Invictus," Jace whispered. "That is not an agent code. Lyra, that is not even a military code." He looked at her, really looked at her. He thought about the way the governor had bowed to her at the gala. He thought about her combat training, the style of the royal duelists. He thought about the way she spoke of the empire, not as a system to be managed, but as a burden to be carried. And he thought about the code, Sol, son, the symbol of the throne. "You are not an oversight agent," Jace said. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "You are not a spy. You are not a noblewoman working for a secret faction." Lyra stood very still. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. Jace walked toward her. "Who has override authority over a regional safety board? Who has codes that bypass the entire bureaucratic lattice?" "Jace, please, tell me," he demanded. Lyra closed her eyes. She looked small. Suddenly, the imperious armor she wore so well shattered, leaving just a girl standing in a dirty mess hall. "We need to land," she said quietly. "I cannot do this here." They set the ship down on a neutral trade station called Providence Point. It was a quiet facility on the edge of a nebula, used mostly by long-haul freighters. They walked out to the observation deck. It was deserted. Above them, the nebula swirled in colors of violet and bruised orange. Below, the starlit dock stretched out into the void. Lyra walked to the railing and gripped it. She looked out at the stars, refusing to meet his eyes. "My name is Lyra Vey," she began, her voice steady but low. "That part is true. Vey is my mother's name. She was a scholar from the Outer Rim. She died when I was 6. She paused, taking a breath that seemed to rattle in her chest. "My father is Valerian, Emperor of the 12 Systems, Keeper of the Solar Throne." She turned to face him. "I am not an agent, Jace. I am the Princess Imperial, the heir to the Empire." Jace stood frozen. He heard the words, but his brain refused to process them. It was too absurd. It was too big. "The Emperor's daughter," he repeated. "Yes. The girl I saved from a rent-a-cop in a transit plaza. Yes. The girl I have been eating nutrient paste with for 4 days. Jace, listen to me." "You lied to me," Jace said. The shock was giving way to a dull, aching hurt. "You lied to me every single minute of every single day. I risked my life for you. I lost my future for you. And you were, what? Slumming it? Playing detective?" "I was trying to save my father's legacy," Lyra cried out. Her composure cracked. "The palace is a cage. Jace, the Silver Court controls everything. The reports I get are sanitized. The advisors are bought. I knew something was rotting in the outer sectors, but no one would tell me the truth. So I left. I ran away to see it for myself." She took a step toward him, her hands reaching out but stopping short of touching him. "I did not intend to drag you into this. You were just supposed to be a distraction at the plaza. But then you stood up for me. You looked at those guards and told them no. Do you know how rare that is? No one tells me no. Everyone lies to me to keep their position. You were the first real thing I had found in years." Jace looked at her. He saw the princess now. He saw the way she held herself, the burden of 1 billion lives resting on her shoulders. But he also saw Lyra. He saw the fear in her eyes, not fear of the assassins, but fear of him, fear of his judgment. "You are the Emperor's daughter," Jace said, his voice quiet. "And you are a mechanic from Sector 4, Lyra said. "And right now," Jace said, looking at the stars, "the entire galaxy wants us both dead." He laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "I got fired for helping the princess. That is definitely going on my resume." Lyra managed a weak smile. "It is a unique qualification." Jace looked back at her. The anger was fading, replaced by a terrifying clarity. The distance between them wasn't just physical anymore. It was a chasm of blood and history. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I knew this would happen," she whispered. "I knew you would look at me and see the throne. I knew you would stop seeing Lyra. And oh, I wanted to be Lyra for just a little while longer." She looked down at her hands. "And because I knew that if you knew the truth, you would realize how impossible this is." "Us." Jace stepped closer. The magnetic pull that had been there since the first night, the electricity that crackled whenever they were close, was suddenly overwhelming. He reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. He warmed them in his. "I don't care about the throne," Jace said. "You should," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "It is a monster that eats people." "I care about the person who laughed when I choked on alien rations," Jace said. "I care about the person who came back for me on the glass walkway." He lifted her chin so she had to look at him. "My fear isn't your title, Lyra. My fear isn't the assassins or the Silver Court." "Then what is it?" she breathed. "It is losing you," Jace said. "It is the thought that even if we win, even if we save the Empire, you go back to a palace made of gold, and I go back to a basement in the stacks. It is the thought that this, right here, right now, is stolen time." Lyra made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Then let us steal it, she whispered. She leaned in. This time there was no interruption, no alarms, no explosions. He kissed her. It was desperate and terrified and sweet. It tasted like starlight and impending doom. It was the kind of kiss two people share when they know the world might end in the morning. For a moment, on that silent dock, the titles vanished. There was no emperor, no mechanic, no conspiracy, just two heartbeats racing in sync against the void when they broke apart. Lyra rested her forehead against his chest. "If we survive this," she murmured into his coat, "I will rewrite the laws. I will tear down the walls between the sectors." "Let's focus on the surviving part first," Jace said, holding her tight. The moment of peace lasted exactly 1 hour. Then, the mission reclaimed them. They had the data from the Moon Archive, but they needed the delivery mechanism. The Silver Court wasn't just going to ask people to accept a clone regent, they were going to force them. The coordinates led them to Echo Point, a frontier world on the edge of explored space. It was a planet of jagged purple mountains and constant howling winds. Heliox had built a research station there. The structure was a black spire that twisted up into the clouds like a drill bit. "That is the array," Jace said as they crouched on a ridge overlooking the valley. "It doesn't look like a comms tower," Lyra noted, scanning it with her binoculars. "No," Jace said, checking his sensor readings. "It is broadcasting on a psionic frequency. It interacts with the neural lattice of the brain. It is not sending data. Lyra, it is sending reality." "We have to shut it down," Lyra said. They infiltrated the facility through the cooling vents. The interior was a nightmare of throbbing organic cables and sleek metal. The air hummed with a sound that wasn't audible but was felt in the teeth and the bones. They reached the central control chamber. In the center of the room, suspended in a beam of pure energy, was the core, a massive pulsating crystal that looked like a frozen heart. "I need to hack the inhibitor controls," Lyra said, running to the main console. "Cover me." Jace took up a position by the door, his stun pistol raised. Lyra began to work, but as soon as her fingers touched the keys, the room shrieked. The array activated. It didn't fire a laser. It fired a thought. Jace gasped and fell to his knees. The world dissolved. Suddenly, he wasn't in the control room. He was back in the transit plaza. But it was wrong. The sky was bleeding red. He saw Lyra. She was standing over him, wearing the robes of the Silver Court. She was laughing. "You thought I cared?" The hallucination of Lyra sneered. "You are nothing. A tool. I used you to get back to my throne." Guards grabbed Jace. He felt their hands, heavy and real. He felt the shock collar snap around his neck. "No!" Jace screamed, clutching his head. "This isn't real." It is real," the Lyra Phantom said. "You are alone. You have always been alone." Jace squeezed his eyes shut. He focused on the pain in his knees. He focused on the memory of the dock, the cold of the railing, the warmth of her hand. "My fear is losing you," he had said. "Then let us steal it," she had replied. That was real. This was a broadcast. "I know who you are," Jace shouted into the red void. "You are a lie." He forced his eyes open. The red sky shattered like glass. He was back in the control room. Lyra was screaming. The feedback from the console had trapped her. Arcs of purple lightning were lashing out from the core, wrapping around her arms, pinning her to the machine. She was convulsing. "Lyra!" Jace scrambled to his feet. He ran toward her, but the energy field knocked him back. "It is overloading," Lyra cried out, her voice strained with agony. I can't break the connection. It's rewriting the safety protocols." She looked at him. Her eyes were burning with golden light. I have to destroy it. Jace, run! No! I am going to short the core. It will kill me, but it will stop the broadcast. Go! Jace looked at the pulsating crystal. He looked at Lyra, who was sacrificing herself by inches. He was a systems analyst. He fixed broken things. He didn't run. He ran at her. He pulled a heavy hydro spanner from his belt. He didn't aim for the machine. He aimed for Lyra. Trust me, he yelled. He jammed the metal tool directly into the bioport on the back of her neck, the interface between her nervous system and the machine. It was a brutal, desperate move. He used his own body to ground the charge. Pain, white and hot, exploded through him. It felt like being struck by lightning. He screamed, his vision going white. He felt the connection sever. The energy arc snapped. The crystal core, deprived of its biological regulator, cracked. A shockwave of pure force blasted them backward. They hit the far wall and crumbled. Silence returned to the room, save for the dying whine of the machinery. Jace blinked. His body felt numb. He dragged himself upright. Lyra lay a few feet away. She wasn't moving. Lyra? He crawled to her. She was not breathing. Her pulse was thready, fluttering like a trapped bird. The bioport on her neck was smoking. He had severed the connection, but the shock had stopped her heart's rhythm. No. No. No, Jace muttered. He ripped open a med kit from his belt. He grabbed a stimulant injector. Come on, princess, you don't get to quit. He plunged the needle into her chest. Nothing. He grabbed the portable defibrillator pads, charged them. Clear. He slammed them against her. Her body jerked. Nothing. Jace felt tears stinging his eyes. Please, not like this. He leaned down. He placed his hands over her heart, not for CPR, but simply to hold her. I am not stealing time just to watch it run out, he whispered. Come back. He hit her with the pads again. Maximum charge. Thump. A gasp. Lyra arched her back, sucking in a desperate, ragged breath. She coughed, rolling onto her side. Jace slumped back, his head hitting the floor. He laughed, a hysterical sobbing sound. Lyra groaned. She rolled onto her back and looked up at the ceiling. Her face was covered in soot, her hair a mess of static. She turned her head to look at Jace. Did you stab me with a wrench? She croaked. It was a hydro spanner, Jace corrected, wiping his eyes. And yes, it was the only way to break the circuit. Lyra closed her eyes and let out a long, shaky exhale. You are officially the worst possible secret the palace could ever discover, she whispered. You are violent, insubordinate, and entirely too good at improvisation. And you are alive, Jace said. Barely. They lay there for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade into dull aches. Then Lyra sat up. She looked at the shattered core. We did it, she said. The prototype is gone. She crawled over to the console, which was sparking but still functional enough to display data. She pulled up the logs. Her eyes hardened. It wasn't just a test. She said, Look. Jace dragged himself over to look. Target destination, the Citadel of Tides. Event, Imperial Unity Summit. Activation time, 48 hours. They weren't just going to broadcast to a sector, Lyra said, her voice turning to ice. They were going to bring a portable version of this array to the summit. They planned to activate it during the Emperor's address. To do what? Jace asked. To rewrite the loyalty of every admiral, governor, and general in the room, Lyra said. They won't need a coup. They will just flip a switch, and the entire leadership of the Empire will believe the Emperor is unfit and the Regent is the savior. It will be a bloodless conquest of the mind. She looked at Jace. The summit is in 2 days, at the capital. That is the heart of the Silver Court's power. Jace said. If we go there, we are walking into a trap. If we don't, the Empire ends on Tuesday, Lyra said. She stood up. She swayed, but she stayed upright. She held out a hand to Jace. We have to crash the summit. Jace, we have to expose them in front of the entire galaxy. Jace looked at her hand. He thought about the peace of the dock. He thought about the quiet life he had wanted. That life was gone. But something better had taken its place. He took her hand and pulled himself up. Okay, Jace said. Let's go crash a party. Lyra smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. I hope you brought your formal wear. I think I left it in the escape pod, Jace said. We will improvise, Lyra said, as we always do. The Citadel of Tides did not float so much as it presided over the ocean. It was a colossal disk of white marble and transparent aluminum, suspended 3,000 feet above the roiling violet seas of the capital world. It was a fortress of diplomacy, designed to intimidate as much as it was to accommodate. To Jace Rowan, it looked like a terrifyingly long way to fall. He stood in a service corridor deep within the station's underbelly, adjusting the uncomfortable strap of his utility belt. He was no longer Jace Rowan, the fugitive human extremist. According to his counterfeit credentials, he was Kalen Voss, a Level 4 atmospheric technician contracted to monitor humidity levels in the main atrium. The disguise was good. The tech uniform was standard-issue gray, anonymous and invisible to the high-born elites who only saw servants as moving furniture. But Jace felt exposed. Every camera felt like a gun barrel. "Can you hear me?" he whispered, tapping the subdermal receiver behind his ear. Loud and clear. Lyra's voice came back. It was calm, but there was a tightness to it, a tension that vibrated through the bone conduction link. "Where are you?" Jace asked. "Entering the lion's den," she replied. Jace pulled up a feed on his datapad, hacking into the public broadcast cameras of the Grand Atrium. The image that filled the screen made his breath catch. The atrium was a cavern of light, filled with the glitter of 1,000 dignitaries, admirals in dress whites, governors in velvet sashes, corporate magnates dripping with jewels. But the camera was focused on the massive gilded doors at the far end. The doors swung open. Lyra Vey stepped through. She was not the woman in the flight suit anymore. She was the Princess Imperial. She wore a gown of woven platinum that looked less like fabric and more like armor. It hugged her frame and flared at the floor like liquid mercury. Her silver hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant braid woven with diamonds. Her face was painted with the traditional gold dust of the court, masking her fatigue, masking her fear, turning her into a beautiful, untouchable statue. She walked with a terrifying grace. The crowd parted for her. A silence rippled through the room, a mix of awe and scandalized whispering. They had all seen the tabloids. They had all seen the pictures of her running with the human. But looking at her now, head held high, eyes cold and golden, the gossip died in their throats. Jace watched her on the small screen, his heart aching with a fierce, quiet pride. "You look terrifying," Jace whispered. "That is the point," Lyra murmured back. "Armor up. Jace, the Silver Court is making its move." Jace moved. He navigated the labyrinth of service tunnels, using his micro-lattice vision to spot the hidden security grids. His job was simple but insane. Keep Lyra connected to the truth while the Silver Court tried to bury her in lies. He reached a junction box overlooking the VIP mezzanine. Through the grate, he could see Lyra being intercepted. A group of courtiers surrounded her. They were smiling, but it was the kind of smile a shark gives before it bites. "Lady Lyra," one of them said, a tall man with the crest of the Silver Court on his lapel. "We were told you were indisposed. Recovering from your ordeal. I am quite well. Lord Vane. Lyra's voice drifted up to Jace, amplified by his audio snooper. And I am not a victim of an ordeal. I am an investigator returning with a report. Lord Vane chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. He was an older man, elegant and cruel, with eyes that looked like chips of flint. Jace recognized him from the dossier. He was the High Counselor. He had been Lyra's tutor when she was a child. Investigator? Vane said smoothly. My dear child, the stress has clearly confused you. We have arranged a private suite for you to rest until the Emperor's address. You must be exhausted from your time in the wild. He gestured to two guards who stepped forward, blocking Lyra's path. It was a polite imprisonment. They were going to sequester her, keep her off the floor until the coup was over. Protocol override, Jace whispered into the comms. Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the Summit Charter. A royal heir cannot be removed from the floor without a medical warrant signed by 3 physicians. Lyra didn't miss a beat. I decline your offer. Counselor, she said, her voice carrying the weight of a gavel strike. And unless you have a medical warrant signed by 3 physicians as per Section 7 of the Charter, you are obstructing the succession. Do you wish to be charged with treason before the appetizers are served? Vane's smile faltered. He looked at the guards, then back at Lyra. He hadn't expected her to know the obscure bylaws. He hadn't expected her to fight. Very well, Vane said, his voice dropping to a hiss. Stay. Watch. It will make no difference. The tide comes in regardless of the swimmer. He bowed mockingly and retreated. Score 1 for the mechanic, Lyra whispered. Don't get cocky, Jace replied, moving down the tunnel. They are not retreating. They are regrouping. He reached the server core for the East Wing. This was where the summit's administrative data was processed. If there was a plan, it was here. Jace jacked into the terminal. His new eyes allowed him to see the flow of data like a rushing river. He waded against the current, looking for the anomaly. There. A locked file, encrypted with a triple helix cipher. Jace's fingers flew across his datapad. He used a brute force decryption algorithm Lyra had taught him on the ship. Crack, crack, open. He read the file. His blood ran cold. Lyra, Jace said, his voice urgent, I found the decree. What does it say? It is a medical directive, Jace said, reading the scrolling text. It declares the Emperor mentally unfit due to advanced neurodegeneration. It is signed by the royal physician. It transfers executive power to the regent immediately following the keynote address. Is the physician's signature real? It looks real, Jace said. But the timestamp is from tomorrow. They pre-signed it. And Lyra, the regent. I see him, Lyra said. Jace looked at the feed again. Entering the hall was a young man who looked like a god, tall, golden-haired, with a jawline that suggested nobility and eyes that projected humble strength. He wore the white sash of the Regency. It was Lord Valerius, the clone. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands, remembering names. He was perfect. He was a masterpiece of genetic engineering and psychological conditioning. He is not human, Jace whispered. He is a biological algorithm. He is talking to Vane, Lyra said. They are laughing. Jace scanned the room's hidden infrastructure. He saw something that made his stomach drop. The ventilation shafts above the atrium. They weren't cycling air. They were emitting a low-frequency hum. Lyra, the vents, Jace warned. They have rigged the atmospheric recyclers with the neuro-broadcast technology. They didn't bring the big array. They turned the station itself into the weapon. If they activate that during the speech, Lyra said, her voice tight. Everyone in this room will become a sleeper agent for the Silver Court. We have to stop the broadcast. I can't do it from here, Jace said. The control node is hardwired. It is in the penthouse level, the Emperor's private sanctum. That area is locked down by the Praetorian Guard, Lyra said. Then we need a shortcut, Jace said. Meet me at the service elevator in the North Quadrant. I have an idea, and it is terrible. I love your terrible ideas, she said. The meet was a disaster. Jace exited the service tunnel just as a squad of shadows, the same stealth operatives from the moon, materialized from the ceiling. They had found him. Jace! Lyra screamed, dropping her persona as she sprinted toward him, hitching up her platinum gown. Jace didn't fight. He hit the emergency release on the anti-gravity shaft next to him. Jump! He yelled. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her into the open shaft. Gravity vanished. They floated, weightless, in a cylinder of blue light that stretched up for 100 stories. The sudden disorientation was nauseating. Debris, tools, dust, loose change floated around them. The shadows dove in after them, activating magnetic boots to run along the walls. Up! Jace shouted, kicking off the wall to propel them higher. They soared upward, dodging plasma fire that sizzled through the zero-G air. Lyra pulled a compact blaster from beneath the folds of her dress, so that was why the gown was stiff, and fired back. Her aim was true. One shadow lost his grip and tumbled into the abyss below. They reached the maintenance hatch for the penthouse level. Jace grabbed the ledge, his muscles screaming as he hauled them both out of the gravity field and onto the metal grating. He slammed the hatch shut and welded it with his laser cutter just as the shadows reached it. They collapsed on the floor of a narrow utility conduit, gasping for air. The space was tiny, filled with pipes and steam. Lyra's dress was torn. Her hair was coming loose, diamonds falling onto the dirty floor. She looked wild and magnificent. Jace was bleeding from a cut on his cheek. His uniform was scorched. They lay there, chests heaving, adrenaline flooding their systems. That was close. Jace wheezed. Too close. Lyra breathed. She turned to him. In the cramped, steam-filled darkness, the reality of their situation crashed down on them. They were 2 floors away from the Emperor. They were surrounded by assassins, and they were running out of time. Lyra reached out and touched the cut on his cheek. Her fingers were trembling. I am sorry, she whispered. I dragged you into the fire. I walked in, Jace corrected. I walked in because I wanted to be where you are. Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes wide and searching, the barrier of class, of species, of duty. It all felt very thin in the dark. If we don't make it, she said, her voice breaking. We will, Jace said fiercely. But if we don't, she insisted, I need you to know. I never felt like a princess until I met you. I just felt like a piece of furniture. You made me real. Jace's heart hammered against his ribs. The desire to kiss her, to hold her and forget the coup and the clone and the empire, was a physical ache. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. Their breath mingled, hot and frantic. When this is over, Jace whispered, his hand gripping her waist, pulling her closer. I am taking you to a place where the nutrient paste actually tastes like food. And I am going to ask you on a real date. No blasters, no falling off buildings. Lyra laughed, a choked, watery sound. I would like that, she whispered. She pulled back, just an inch. Her eyes hardened. The steel returned. But first, we have to save the galaxy. She stood up, smoothing her torn dress. The Emperor's sanctum is through that door. They moved. The Emperor's sanctum was not a throne room. It was a hospital room. The air smelled of antiseptic and old flowers. Monitors beeped rhythmically. In the center of the room, lying in a suspension bed, was Emperor Valerian. He looked frail. His skin was translucent, his breathing shallow. Standing over him was Counselor Vane, and the regent, Valerius. They turned as Jace and Lyra burst in. "Ah," Vane said, not looking surprised. "The prodigal daughter returns, and she brought her pet." He gestured to the regent. Valerius stepped forward, smiling that perfect empty smile. "Hello, sister," the clone said. His voice was smooth, a perfect mimicry of the Emperor's tone from old vids. "You are not my brother," Lyra spat, stepping forward, her blaster raised. "You are a lab experiment," Vane laughed. "Does it matter? He has the face. He has the DNA. And in 10 minutes, when the broadcast activates, he will have the love of the people. They will look at him and feel a surge of loyalty so potent they would die for him." He looked at Jace. "And you, Mr. Rowan, you have been a nuisance." Vane tapped a command on his wrist. The blast doors behind them slammed shut. The room was sealed. "You cannot stop the broadcast," Vane said. "The frequency is already ramping up. The Emperor is too weak to speak. The decree is signed. It is over." Jace looked at the medical equipment surrounding the Emperor. He looked at the data scrolling on the monitors. "He isn't weak," Jace said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. Jace pointed to the IV drip. "That isn't medicine. That's a sedative. A neurosuppressant. You are keeping him asleep." Vane's eyes narrowed. "You are clever for a mechanic. Yes, he has been difficult. He refused to sign the decree, so we are signing it for him." Lyra looked at her father. Rage, white-hot and pure, flared in her chest. She didn't shoot Vane. She shot the IV bag. The bag exploded, drenching the floor in clear fluid. Vane roared. Valerius lunged. Jace intercepted him. He tackled the clone. It was like tackling a statue. The clone was stronger, faster. Valerius threw Jace across the room like a rag doll. Jace hit the wall and crumpled, gasping. Lyra fired at Valerius, but the clone moved with preternatural speed, dodging the bolt and knocking the weapon from her hand. He grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the ground. "You are obsolete," Valerius said, his voice devoid of emotion. Jace scrambled to his feet. He saw the control console for the room's communications array. The master key. He didn't have a weapon. He had a data spike. He ran for the console. "Stop him!" Vane shouted. Valerius threw Lyra aside and turned to Jace. Jace reached the console. He jammed the spike in. Broadcast override. Initiated. He didn't turn off the array. He redirected the input. Instead of the neuro broadcast, he patched in the audio and video from the room's security feed, live, to the atrium, to the Empire. Valerius grabbed Jace by the neck and slammed him onto the console. Jace felt a rib crack. The pain was blinding. "Cancel it," Valerius hissed, squeezing. Jace choked, his vision tunneling. He looked at the screen. The feed was live. "Smile," Jace wheezed. "You are on camera." On the massive screens in the grand atrium below, the image of the regent strangling a technician appeared. The audio of Vane admitting to the sedation played. Valerius froze. He looked at the screen. The perfect mask of charisma shattered, replaced by the confusion of a machine that had encountered an error. In the atrium, silence fell. Then, chaos. In the sanctum, Vane went pale. "You fool," he whispered. Lyra stood up. She walked over to her father's bed. She ripped the sedative lines from his arm. "Wake up, father," she said softly. The Emperor's eyes fluttered. The haze of the drugs began to clear. He looked at Lyra. He looked at the clone. He looked at Vane. Valerian sat up. He was weak, but his eyes were sharp. He was the man who had held the Empire together for 40 years. "Vane," The Emperor croaked. His voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. Vane backed away. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. "Guards!" the Emperor commanded. The doors blew open, but it wasn't the Silver Court's shadows. It was the Imperial Praetorian Guard, the ones who answered only to the bloodline. They had seen the broadcast. They knew who the traitor was. They stormed the room. Valerius tried to fight, but he was overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Vane was pinned to the floor. Jace slid down the console, clutching his chest. He watched as Lyra stood by her father. She looked regal. She looked powerful. She looked 1,000,000 miles away. Vane looked up from the floor, blood on his lip. "You think this saves you?" He spat at Lyra. "Look at him." He pointed at Jace. "You let a human, a low-born radical, touch the controls of the throne. You let him into the sanctum. You have saved the Empire. Yes, but you have destroyed your reputation. The people will never accept a ruler who consorts with that." Lyra looked at Jace. She saw the bruise forming on his neck. She saw the way he held his ribs. Vane smiled cruelly. "Disown him. Denounce him as a pawn. Tell the galaxy you used him and discarded him. It is the only way to keep the peace. If you validate him, you invite chaos. The Highborns will revolt." The Emperor looked at his daughter. He waited. Lyra walked over to Jace. She knelt down, her platinum dress pooling on the floor. She took his hand. She looked into the camera, the feed that was still broadcasting to billions. "I did not use him," Lyra said, her voice clear and ringing. "He saved me. He saved my father. He saved you." She stood up, pulling Jace with her. She kept his hand in hers. The Silver Court believed that power comes from blood and secrecy. They believed that a clone who looked perfect was better than a leader who was human. She squeezed Jace's hand. "This man lost everything to do what was right. He is not a pawn. He is the best of us. And if the Empire cannot accept that, then the Empire does not deserve to be saved." She looked at Vane. "I do not denounce him. I honor him." Silence stretched across the galaxy. Then the Emperor spoke. "Well said," he murmured. He gestured to the guards. "Take the traitors away, and get Mr. Rowan a doctor." The fallout was not immediate peace. It was a storm. Heliox was stripped of its charter within the hour. The assets were frozen. The fleets grounded. The Silver Court was dismantled, its members arrested or fleeing into the dark. But the image of the princess holding the hand of the mechanic became the most debated image in history. Riots broke out in the conservative sectors. They called Lyra a traitor to her blood. Celebrations broke out in the lower levels. They called Jace a hero. The Empire was saved, but it was fractured. The line between high and low, alien and human, had been blurred, and people were terrified of the new shape of the world. Jace sat in a recovery room in the Citadel. His ribs were taped. He watched the news feeds. Constitutional crisis? The human who stole the heart of the throne. The door opened. Lyra walked in. She had changed out of the gown into simple robes. She looked tired. "How is the patient?" she asked. "Alive," Jace said, "which is a pleasant surprise." He looked at the screen. "They are angry," he said. "Change makes people angry," Lyra said. She sat on the edge of his bed. Vane was right about one thing, Jace said quietly. "My presence. It weakens you. It makes you a target for the traditionalists." Lyra took his hand. "Let them target me. I am done hiding." She looked at him with a softness that made his breath catch. "My father wants to see you. He wants to offer you a medal and a job." "I don't want a medal," Jace said. "What do you want?" Jace looked at her. He thought about the apartment in the stacks. He thought about the nebula. He thought about the terrible nutrient paste. "I want that date," Jace said. "The one I promised." Lyra smiled. It was the smile of the girl on the fire escape. "I know a place," she said. "The food is terrible, but the company is excellent." She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a desperate kiss this time, it was a promise. "We have a lot of work to do." "Jace Rowan." "I'm ready when you are, Princess." Outside the window, the sun was rising over the violet ocean. The citadel was still floating, but the world below it had changed forever. The days following the Unity Summit were not quiet. Peace did not descend upon the Empire like a soft blanket. It arrived like a structural collapse, loud and messy and full of dust. Jace Rowan stood on the balcony of the guest quarters in the Citadel of Tides, looking down at the ocean. The water was no longer just violet waves. It was a canvas for the unrest of 1 billion souls. Holographic barges floated on the horizon, projecting slogans into the sky. One barge, funded by the Human Labor Union, projected a 50-foot image of Jace's face with the word equality burning in gold beneath it. Another barge, darker and sleek, commissioned by the Preservationist Bloc, projected an image of Lyra with a jagged crack running through her silhouette. The text beneath it read, "Purity before passion. Protect the bloodline." The Empire had been saved from a coup, but it had woken up with a hangover. The Silver Court was dismantled, its leaders in chains or in hiding. But the ideas they represented, that humans were labor, that aliens were rulers, that order required strict segregation, did not vanish overnight. They had simply moved from the shadows of the palace to the streets of the capital. Jace turned away from the balcony. The room was too large, too white, too silent. It was filled with baskets of exotic fruit and floral arrangements sent by people who, a week ago, would not have spat on him if he were on fire. There was a chime at the door. "Enter," Jace said. A protocol droid slid in. It held a silver tray with a single, heavy envelope. "Message from the Commerce Guild," the droid announced. "They request an immediate audience." Jace sighed. "Send them in." A man walked in. He was a Tellarite, short and broad, wearing a suit that cost more than the entire ventilation system of Sector 4. He smiled, exposing rows of sharp, well-maintained teeth. "Mr. Rowan," the man said, bowing slightly. "I am Director Hax. It is an honor to breathe the same air as the hero of the summit." "I am not a hero," Jace said, leaning against a marble pillar. "I am a technician who got lucky with a broadcast override." "Modesty," Hax said, waving a clawed hand. "It plays well with the demographic. The working class sees themselves in you. That is a valuable commodity, Mr. Rowan, very valuable." He placed a datapad on the table. "The Commerce Guild is looking for a new spokesperson. Someone to represent integration, someone to show that we are listening to the lower levels. We want to offer you a contract." Jace looked at the pad. The number at the bottom was staggering. 2 million credits per annum, plus a penthouse in the core ring, plus a scrubbed history file that would erase his father's debts and his own arrest record. "All you have to do," Hax said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial purr, "is sit for a few interviews. Read the scripts we provide. Frame the narrative. You tell the galaxy that the system works, that anyone can rise if they just follow the rules." Jace picked up the pad. He looked at the zeros. It was safety. It was luxury. It was everything he had thought he wanted when he walked into the Heliox interview a lifetime ago. But he remembered the mining colony. He remembered the glass cages. He remembered the look in Lyra's eyes when she realized she had been lied to by the people who claimed to protect her. If I sign this, Jace said, looking up, I become a mascot. I tell people that the system is fair because one guy got lucky. It is inspiring, Hax insisted. It is a lie, Jace said. He dropped the pad back onto the table. It made a sharp clatter in the quiet room. The system isn't fair, Jace said. It is broken. People are still hungry in Sector 4. People are still being exploited in the Rim. If I tell them it is fixed because I got a check, then I am no better than Heliox. I am just cheaper to buy. Hax's smile vanished. Mr. Rowan, you are in a precarious position. You have enemies. Wealth is armor. Do not throw away your shield because of misplaced idealism. I survived a moon full of assassins and a room full of traitors without a shield, Jace said. I think I will take my chances with the truth. Get out. Hax stared at him for a long moment, then sniffed disdainfully, grabbed his datapad, and marched out. Jace let out a breath he had been holding. He felt lighter, poorer, certainly, but lighter. While Jace fought off the opportunists, Lyra fought for her birthright. The Grand Council chamber was a circular amphitheater of black stone. It was where the laws of the Empire were debated. And today, it was where the future of the succession would be decided. Lyra stood in the center of the floor. She wore the formal robes of her station, white silk embroidered with the solar crest, but she wore no jewelry, no crown. She stood unadorned, her hands clasped behind her back. Surrounding her, in the tiered seats, were the counselors, 300 representatives from the 12 systems. Some looked at her with admiration. Many looked at her with skepticism. Counselor Vane was gone, arrested for treason, but his ideology lingered like smoke. A representative from the Highborn Coalition stood up. He was a tall, gaunt humanoid with pale blue skin. Princess Lyra, he began, his voice echoing through the chamber. No one denies your bravery. You exposed the conspiracy. You saved the Emperor. For that, we are grateful. But, he continued, his tone sharpening, we must consider the stability of the throne. The monarchy relies on the perception of elevation. You have entangled yourself with a commoner, a human radical. You have allowed your judgment to be clouded by emotional attachment to a lower species. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the conservative blocs. Can we trust a ruler? The representative asked. Who chooses the company of a mechanic over the counsel of her peers? Does this not show a dangerous lack of discernment? Lyra waited for the murmurs to die down. She did not flinch. She did not look down. She looked up, scanning the faces of the people who ruled the galaxy. You speak of discernment, counselor, Lyra said. Her voice was calm, amplified by the acoustics of the room. I was raised in this palace. I was taught by the finest tutors. I was surrounded by peers, as you call them. And yet, for 3 years, a conspiracy grew in these halls like a cancer. My tutors were the architects of treason. My peers were silent accomplices. The people who claimed to uphold the dignity of the Empire were plotting to enslave its citizens. She stepped forward, turning to face the entire assembly. You ask if my judgment was clouded by a human. I tell you this. When I was cornered in a transit plaza, surrounded by guards who were abusing their power, not one high-born citizen stepped in. Not one person of status raised a hand. They watched. They filmed. They calculated the risk to their own careers. There was a heavy silence in the room. One person stepped in, Lyra said. One person who had nothing. One person who had just secured his own future and chose to throw it away because he saw a stranger in pain. She paused, letting the weight of the memory fill the space. Jace Rowan did not know who I was. He did not know I could reward him. He helped me because he possessed the one thing that this council has lacked for a generation: empathy. She looked directly at the blue-skinned representative. You say his status makes him unworthy. I say his integrity makes him the only person worth listening to. He reminded me that a ruler does not sit above the people to be worshipped. A ruler stands with the people to protect them. She raised her chin. I am not ashamed of my association with him. I am ashamed that it took a mechanic from the lower sectors to teach the imperial court what honor looks like. If that disqualifies me in your eyes, then declare the throne vacant. But I will not rule as a symbol of your vanity. I will rule as a servant of the truth, or I will not rule at all. For 10 seconds, the chamber was absolutely silent. Then, a single clap echoed from the upper tier. Then another. It was the representatives from the outer colonies. Then the trade guilds joined in. Then the moderates. The sound grew into a roar. It was not unanimous. The conservatives sat stone-faced and silent. But it was enough. The tide had turned. The Emperor's private garden was a sanctuary of bioengineered flora, a place where trees from 12 different worlds grew in tangled harmony under a simulated sun. Jace walked along the gravel path, feeling painfully out of place in his simple civilian clothes. He found Emperor Valerian sitting on a stone bench, watching a pair of avian lizards chase each other through a fountain. The Emperor looked better than he had in the hospital room, but he was still frail. He walked with a cane now, and his hair was entirely white. Mr. Rowan, the Emperor said, not looking up. Please, sit. Jace hesitated, then sat on the opposite end of the bench. Your Majesty. No titles today, Valerian said. Just 2 men who survived a very bad week. The Emperor turned to look at Jace. His eyes were the same gold as Lyra's, but they held a century of exhaustion. My daughter spoke to the council today, Valerian said. She was formidable. I heard, Jace said. She is good at that. She told them that you were the moral compass of the crisis, Valerian said. She credits you with saving not just her life, but her soul. She gives me too much credit, Jace said. I just drove the getaway car. Valerian chuckled. A getaway car that crossed 3 systems and infiltrated a secure fortress. Do not diminish your role. Son. The Emperor leaned forward, resting his hands on his cane. The Empire is changing. Jace, the Silver Court is gone, but the wound they left is deep. We cannot go back to the way things were. We need to build something new, something that bridges the gap between the tower and the street. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small data chip. I am forming a new body, the Interspecies Ethics Commission. It will have oversight authority over corporate operations, colonial governance, and judicial fairness. It needs people who are not afraid to tell powerful men that they are wrong. He held the chip out to Jace. I want you to be a founding member, not a figurehead, an auditor. You have a talent for seeing the flaws in a system. I want you to find the flaws in mine. Jace looked at the chip. It wasn't money. It wasn't a penthouse. It was work. Hard, dangerous, necessary work. I am not a politician, Jace said. Good, Valerian replied. I have enough politicians. I need a human who knows what it feels like to be crushed by the machinery. Jace took the chip. It felt light in his hand, but heavy in its implication. If I take this, Jace said slowly, people will say it is because of Lyra. They will say I am the Queen's favorite pet. Let them talk, Valerian said. You cannot control the whisperers. Jace, you can only control your work. Do the job well, and eventually the work will speak louder than the gossip. Jace nodded. I can do the work. Good, Valerian said. He stood up slowly. And regarding my daughter, Jace stiffened. She is stubborn, Valerian said, a twinkle in his eye. She is intelligent, and she is very much in love with you. Jace looked down at the gravel. I know, sir. It will be difficult, Valerian said. The galaxy does not like things that do not fit in boxes. You will be stared at. You will be judged. But if you can endure a moon full of assassins, I suspect you can endure a few rude dinner parties. I'm not afraid of dinner parties, Jace said. Then you are braver than I am, Valerian said. Jace found Lyra on the observation deck at sunset. She was looking out at the city, stripped of her court robes, wearing a simple tunic and trousers. Hey, Jace said, joining her at the railing. Hey, she replied. I heard you set the council on fire today. It needed the heat, she said. She looked at him. I heard you turn down the Commerce Guild's millions. They wanted a mascot, Jace said. I'm not good at smiling on command. Lyra smiled now, a genuine soft expression that belonged only to him. My father offered you the commission role. He did. Jace said, I took it. Lyra let out a breath of relief. She reached out and took his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. I was worried you would run, she admitted. I was worried the pressure would be too much, that you would want to go back to being invisible. I thought about it, Jace confessed. Being invisible is safe, but I can't go back. I saw too much. I saw what happens when good people stay quiet. He squeezed her hand. But Lyra, us, this isn't going to be a fairy tale. I am still the mechanic. You are still the heir. Half the Empire hates the idea of us together. We don't hide it, Lyra said firmly. That was my mistake before. Trying to compartmentalize my life, we do not hide. We do not apologize. But we also do not let them turn us into a show. What do you mean? I mean, we don't let them market our love as a political slogan, she said. We don't do the photo shoots. We don't sell the romance. We just live. We work. We stand together. We let the reality of it be our defense. Resistance through existence. Jace mused. Exactly, Lyra said. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Are you ready for that? To be the most scrutinized man in the galaxy? Jace looked at her. He saw the strength in her jaw and the vulnerability in her eyes. As long as I get to keep the girl who laughs at bad rations, Jace said, I can handle the rest. 3 days later, they took a transport down to the surface. No royal guard, no press pool. Just 2 people in hooded coats. Blending into the evening crowd, they went to Sector 4. The smog was still there, smelling of ozone and broth. The neon signs still flickered with glitches. But there was a difference. The air felt charged, not with fear, but with possibility. They walked to the transit plaza. It was busy. Commuters rushed for the maglevs. Street vendors shouted prices. They stopped near the fountain where the water recycled in gray arcs. It looks exactly the same, Lyra said, pulling her hood back slightly. Jace looked at the spot where he had stood, the place where he had ruined his life to save hers. I stood right there, Jace said, pointing to a scuff mark on the concrete. I was so scared. I thought my heart was going to explode. Mom, why did you do it? Lyra asked. She had asked him before, but this time the question felt different. It was the closing of a circle. Jace watched a drone buzz overhead. Because I was tired, he said. I was tired of watching the strong eat the weak. I was tired of being a cog. And you looked like you needed a hand. Lyra stepped closer to him. The crowd flowed around them, ignoring them. For a moment, they were just 2 faces in the stream. You said a line that day. Lyra said, "It was on the news for weeks. I lost my job opportunity for helping an alien girl, and I'd do it again." Jace grimaced. It was a catchy soundbite. It was the truth, Lyra said. "But you were wrong about one thing." "What?" "You didn't lose your opportunity." Jace. She took his hand in the middle of the crowded plaza. "You traded a job that would have kept you small for a choice that made the world big. Your lost opportunity became the Empire's gained future." Jace looked at her. He saw the title of their story in her eyes, not as a headline, but as a promise kept. The Empire's future. Jace repeated, "That is a lot of pressure for a Tuesday." Lyra laughed. "Then let's get to work." Epilogue. The wind on the planet. Ethelgard was cold and smelled of pine and iron. It was a frontier world, a place of jagged mountains and deep forests, far from the polished marble of the capital. It was also the site of the largest Heliox detention camp in the sector. The fences were coming down. Jace stood in the mud, wearing a heavy thermal coat with the insignia of the Ethics Commission on the shoulder. He held a laser cutter, slicing through the thick barbed wire that had perimetered the camp for a decade. Around him, a team of engineers, human, Tellarite, and 3 other species were dismantling the guard towers. The prisoners had been released weeks ago, sent home with reparations. Now, they were tearing down the scar they had left behind. "Need a hand with that?" Jace turned. Lyra was walking through the mud. She wore practical gear, her boots caked in dirt. She wasn't holding a scepter, she was holding a crate of medical supplies for the local village. "I think I've got it," Jace said, kicking a section of fence free. It clattered to the ground with a satisfying metallic thud. Lyra set the crate down and stood next to him. They looked out at the valley. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the broken remnants of the camp. "It is going to take years to clean this all up," Jace said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Heliox left a mess on a dozen worlds." "We have time," Lyra said. She watched a group of children from the village running through the field where the fences used to be. They were laughing. Jace looked at her. The wind caught a strand of her silver hair. She looked tired. Her hands were rougher than they used to be, and there were worry lines around her eyes that hadn't been there at the gala. She had never looked more beautiful. He realized then that the story wasn't about the coup. It wasn't about the scandal. Those were just the explosions that cleared the ground. The story was this: the work, the mud, the choice to show up, day after day, and fix what was broken. Doing the right thing had cost him his safety. It had cost him his anonymity. But looking at Lyra, and looking at the open field, he knew the exchange rate was in his favor. Power without empathy collapsed into cruelty. They had seen that. But love across boundaries, that wasn't just romance. Jace took Lyra's hand. She squeezed it, her palm warm and calloused against his. That was resistance. "Ready for the next sector?" Jace asked. Lyra picked up the crate. "Always," she said. They turned and walked together toward the transport, leaving the ruins of the cage behind them, walking steadily into the open, difficult, beautiful horizon.